Do you ever stop and ask yourself, hey, I wonder what Mangs thinks about the Danganronpa games? Well, you're in luck, because this is a video about what I think about the Danganronpa games. Why am I making this video? It's a bit of a spur of the moment kind of thing. I just finished the 3 games, and I had a really good time, so I decided, you know what? Why don't I make a video about it? There's probably someone out there who would be interested in this. So yeah, in this video, I'm going to be talking about my opinions on the Danganronpa games. I'm going to go through each one. There's 3 in total. There's some spin-off games that I haven't tried yet, but I'm just going to be talking about the 3 main ones. And I'm going to be talking about my opinions on the plot, my least and most favorite students of each game, and my most favorite trial from each game. And then I'm going to be talking briefly about the endings of each game as well. So if you haven't played Danganronpa and you want to, don't watch this video. This is a game you have to experience for yourself. If you get spoiled, it's not going to be the same. However, if you have played Danganronpa and you want to know what I think about the series, well, this is going to be the video for you. So make yourself comfortable. Let's begin. Alright, so first off, a very quick recap about what the game is all about for those of you watching who haven't played it. You know, I really recommend you go play it for yourself, but you know, if you're still watching, I can't stop you. So it's a game about murder mysteries. A bunch of high school students gets trapped inside an academy, they can't leave, and they're forced to play a killing game where they have to murder each other. Now, they can't just murder each other outright, they have to do it sneakily, because as soon as a body's discovered, they're forced to go to a class trial, where they have to try and figure out who the murderer is. And the stakes are pretty high, because if they can't figure out who the murderer is, then everyone but the murderer is killed, and the murderer gets to leave the academy. However, if the murderer gets caught, then the murderer will be killed, and then the killing game will continue with less and less students. So basically it's a survival game where they have to fight for their lives. They can't leave the school, they're barred in, they're not able to break out, and they're being held there by this weird bear robot guy called Monokuma. If they try to resist, then he will just kill them. So basically they're helpless and they're forced to play along with this game. But the fun part is it's actually very exciting because, you know, you start caring about these students, you talk to them, you build friendships with them, and then bam, suddenly out of nowhere, one of them will die and you'll have to figure out who the murderer is. And, you know, it's a lot of betrayals, a lot of plot twists, the trials can get really complicated. You have to use investigation skills to try and figure out who did it, and people will lie and you have to figure out why, you have to figure out their motive. It's absolutely insane. Like, the more the game progresses, the trials get more and more complicated. You'll have some insane plot twists that you won't see coming, and it's a lot of fun. Alright, so let's start by talking about the first game. Now, I did play this game together with another person. The other 2 games I played on my own, but the first game I played with another person, and I actually really recommend it. Just like playing Fire Emblem with another person can be really funny, playing Danganronpa with another person was actually really entertaining. I'm going to start off by talking about my favorite students from the first game, and there's actually a lot of them because I really liked a lot of the cast of this game. So obviously one of my favorites was Junko Onishima. I don't think I really need to go into detail as to why I love her so much. Of course, I got really pissed off because she dies first. And I had spent all my free time with her, and then she gets killed, and I was so annoyed. I was like, ah, come on, like, why did they kill that student off first? There's 16 of them, and they just had to kill my waifu. Of course, the big plot twist is that it wasn't really Junko who died, it was her twin sister dressed up as Junko, and of course Junko herself plays a huge part in the plot of Danganronpa, but I didn't know that at the time. I just liked her because she's pretty, and you know, when she came back I was really pleased, but for a big majority of the game I was like, ah man, I'm a little upset now because they killed my waifu. Another student that I really liked was Kyoko. I had a bit of a love-hate relationship with her. Sometimes I was a little annoyed by the way she was overly cryptic and didn't really tell me much. Kind of like how Azura is in Fates. I always got the sense that Kyoko knew everything, but she didn't tell me about it. She just kept hinting. Of course, I understand from a gameplay perspective or a design perspective why Kyoko can't just come in and solve all the riddles for you, but it's nice to have someone who prods you on and helps you out during the trials. And towards the end of the game, I did really start liking Kyoko a lot, even though there's this weird part of the game where she gets mad at you for some reason, and I thought she was acting, but she wasn't, and then she's suddenly not mad at you anymore. She's a bit of a weird girl, but I ended up liking her a lot. Of course, I also loved Mondo. I think this was greatly helped by the fact that he's voiced by Keith Silverstein, who voices Saber in Echoes. I love his voice so much. But I also just ended up liking Mondo a lot, you know, a bit of a badass guy who talks with his fists. And I love the bromance that he got with Taka. towards like the mid part of the game. Although I didn't like Taka as a student, I loved the little romance that they had between them when they started fighting, and then suddenly the next day they're best buds again. That was kind of cute. Another character that I really liked, who I didn't think I would, is Sakura. When I saw her, I was like, oh god, this is just going to be Rinka from Fates, but in this game. But no, she actually ended up being one of my favorite characters in that game. Really liked Sakura a lot. Another character, again, there's a lot of them on here, but I loved a lot of the characters in this game. Hifuma was a character that I initially didn't like because he was so annoying. Like, he was just overly memey, but I don't know, he grows on you, man. Like, he really grows on you, and like a couple trials in, I really started to like him, and I didn't realize how much I missed Hifuma until after he died. After he died, the Danganronpa game lost a little bit of its charm, and it's weird to say, but it's like he added something to the whole game, and once he was gone, I found that I really missed him. I missed his stupid lines and his stupid memes, you know? And lastly, another character that I really liked was Celeste. Celeste was such an intriguing character to me. I loved how she was a bit of a gambler and how she was all about like a facade. Like, of course, she ended up being quite different than what you initially see. Like, what you see at first is her putting on an act. Of course, that's not how she really speaks or how she really is. She ended up being quite evil, but I found her very intriguing, and her trial, which I'll talk about later, was really one of my favorites. Now let's talk about my least favorite students. Byakuya, he annoyed the crap out of me, man. Like, I wanted to like him because he was very intriguing, but man, he just does the same thing throughout the entire game. He just insults you and insults you, and I understand that's his gimmick, but the 50th time he does it, it kind of loses its charm. I can really dig a sarcastic character who takes jabs at people, but he did it too much, and it just became very repetitive. It was like, oh, you imbecile, idiot, oh, I hate you, blah, blah, blah. And towards the end, you just go like, yeah, whatever, Byakuya, just get it out of the way, you know, you come to insult us and then you leave. And he had a moment where he kind of like gets surprised because he gets one of the trials completely wrong, and you'd think that would humiliate him a little bit, and he does for a brief moment, and then he kind of just goes back to being his old self. There's very little development there. There's a tiny bit of development. He starts hanging out with you more after that, but he's still very much the same Byakuya, and I would have liked to see him maybe tone himself down a notch. But yeah, no, he just ended up annoying me. I did find the relationship he had with Toko kind of amusing, but Byakuya himself was a character that just kind of annoyed me. Another character that I didn't like was Hiro. Can you mention a time, aside from the fact that, you know, people tried to frame him for murder multiple times, can you really like say for certain anything that he contributed to the plot? Every time he opens his mouth, he just says dumb stuff, and in none of the trials he has nothing to add to any of them. He just says stupid stuff all the time, and I don't know, I felt like he was just kind of a waste of space, and I didn't really like his gimmick either, like the ultimate fortune teller. I get it right 30% of the time. So yeah, no, I didn't like Hiro at all. And I didn't like Taka either. Taka was just very annoying. Whenever he talked, I just kind of wanted his dialogue to be over so I could listen to other people talk. I do find it a little bit sad that he goes through this transformation mid-game and he changes his personality, and then right afterwards he just dies. You know, you don't get any time to actually get to know this new Taka. I don't know, it was a little intrigued because it was like, oh, Taka changed his personality, and there's like, and he's dead immediately. So you never really get to explore around with it a lot. So yeah, those are my most favorite and least favorite students from that game. I think that's mostly what I have to say. There's gonna be some students that I skip, of course, because there's 16 of them, but you know, the other students, they were cool too. There were no students that I like hated in this game, but these are like my top and least favorite students overall. And now I want to talk about my favorite trial from the first game, and there were a lot of really good ones, but by far my favorite one is the third one, where Celeste and Hifuma works together to take out Taka, and then they try to frame Hiro by dressing him up as a weird robot. It is such a wonderful case because there's so much double crossing going on. First, Hifuma and Celeste works together, and then Celeste double crosses Hifuma and kills him at the end so that she takes up two guys with one case, basically. And you're allowed to do that in Danganronpa. You're allowed to kill up to 2 people per trial. And what I love about that case is how it messes with your perception of time, because they use 3 different murder weapons with like different numbers on them, and they make you think that they happen in a special sequence, whereas they actually happen in a completely different sequence. And then of course Hifuma playing dead and then standing up from the murder scene and walking away, which makes you think that someone moved his body, but in reality he was actually alive the whole time. That was really, really well done. Although I have to ask myself, like, what was his plan after that? Like, because at some point he would have to reveal to everyone that he was alive, and at that point it would be obvious that he worked with the killer. So I don't really know what Hifuma had planned to do after that, but he was kind of like very devoted to Celeste, and he was willing to do whatever she told him to. So I guess he wasn't really thinking clearly on that end. But man, what a cool trial. Like, the only flaw in that was like framing Hero is kind of stupid because the dude's so dumb. He would never plan anything of the sort. It was very obvious that Hero was being framed from the get-go, but of course the real mystery was figuring out who actually killed Taka. Now, I really loved that trial. It had a great ending as well, of course, revealing that Celeste has a completely different accent and that she's not really the person she says she is, and she's actually pretty evil, but she really had us all fooled, and she came really close to winning too. So yeah, the third trial was really, really cool and really memorable, and I really loved it. I actually figured out that it was Celeste like halfway through the trial, and I was really happy when I got it right. And then I want to talk very briefly about the ending of the first game, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because there's not a lot to talk about. The real ending is at the end of the third game, which puts the other two into perspective, obviously. I knew from the start that this was going to be a Fade to Black ending, and that's exactly what happened. You know, it doesn't really explain a whole lot. It basically just prompts you to play the sequel. You know, you figure out that Junko is behind everything, and you take her down in one final class trial, and then the remaining student gets to leave the school. And then, of course, as the doors open, I just knew this is it's gonna fade out and say the end, and that's exactly what happens. It doesn't explain anything, really. You don't get to see what's outside the school, but of course, you know, that makes sense considering once you play the third game, you know what it's all about. But at the time, I was very disappointed. I was like, I don't like games who do this, like mystery endings. It's not very satisfying, you know. I like a game that explains things properly towards the end, but you know, I knew that there were multiple games, so I knew that the first game wasn't going to answer all the questions, and of course it didn't. So, you know, the remaining students gets to leave the school, the end, play the sequel. That's basically it. So let's move on to the second game. And then we move on to the second game, Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair. This time around we are on a tropical island, which I thought was a pretty nice change of scenery. It's a lot more open, there's a lot more places you can explore. There's actually multiple islands that you can walk around on. So it kind of gave me a little bit of a Monkey Island vibe. I used to play that as a kid and I really loved it. So I actually really enjoyed it. You know, you're on this tropical beach resort with a bunch of high schoolers, and it starts off really nice, you know, until of course Monokuma shows up and wrecks the show and kind of changes the rules, and you have to do the killing game again. One thing I really liked about Danganronpa 2 is that the music, I think, was a lot better. Danganronpa 1 had a pretty good soundtrack, but I really enjoyed the island-y, tropical feel of the soundtrack, and it just really cheered me up, you know, walking around the island. I really enjoyed it. It's a lot more fan servicey. Obviously, there's a lot of beach scenes, you know, you're on an island, so of course there's going to be like bathing suits and stuff like that, but I really enjoyed the atmosphere of the game. I really enjoyed it, you know. I thought the first game could be a little cramped at times, and I think it was very much designed to be that way. You know, you locked into an academy, but now you actually get to freely explore different islands, which was really nice. So now let's talk about my most favorite and least favorite students from the second game. I will say overall that I found the cast of the second game to be a lot more colorful and vibrant and energetic, but I think this may be due to the theme of the second game. After all, you're on a tropical island, so the atmosphere is a little brighter, and I do think this reflects on how the students behave. The first game was a lot darker, whereas the second game was a lot more cheery, and so I also find the students to be a little more cheery in the way that they act and behave. Now, I will say that while I greatly enjoyed the cast of the second game, I didn't connect with as many of the characters there, I found, as I did in the first one. I think that the first game has some deeper characters, but the second game has a lot more enjoyable characters overall in how they act. And obviously one of my favorites from the start was Sonya, Nevermind. I love her, I absolutely adore her gimmick, everything about her personality, her design, the way she speaks, just an absolute gorgeous character. But I will also say that she's also hilarious. Like, she made me laugh so many times, you know, the way she's just a huge weeb, the way she loves weird history, and there's a couple parts during the game where she loses her composure and starts swearing, and I laughed my ass off. I found it so hilarious. It's kind of like, she reminds me a little bit of Lara Shell, but less pompous in a way. Another student that I really liked was Maiken, the ultimate nurse. Now, I'm not so sure if it's that I like her or that I feel sorry for her, but my heart really broke when I learned about her backstory and stuff like that. Such a tragic character, and I just, you know, you should kind of want to give her a hug, you know? That's she's just so dear, and I just felt really sorry for her. Another student that I really loved was Fuyuhiko? I don't know how you pronounce his name. I don't remember right now, but of course he started off as a bit of an annoying edgelord, and then after the second trial, which I'll talk more about later, he turns into this absolutely amazing character. What a way to redeem an edgelord. Like, that is how you do it. I really, really love this character. I ended up spending a lot of free time with him and unlocking his entire backstory. I just really, really liked his character. And then lastly, a student that I really liked, although I'm not so sure if I like him because of his personality as how much he affects the plot, and that is Nagito. He is definitely crazy and a very weird character, but he always had some sort of impact on each of the class trials, and you were always left wondering, what's he going to do next, you know, what has he meddled with this time? He was definitely a character that spiced up everything considerably, which I always like in a game like this. And I really also enjoy how for a brief moment you take control of his character and you actually get to see the game through his point of view for like a part during the middle of the game, you know, when you go through those riddle games and stuff like that. You actually get to control Nagito, which was very fascinating. Like, it's really weird when a game suddenly changes the perspective of the main character without, you know, any notice. So I did find that very interesting. As for the students that I didn't like, Teruteru was definitely a character that I wasn't a huge fan of. He's just kind of weird and creepy, but he does die pretty early on. His trial was very fascinating, of course, but him as a character, I never really liked him much, although I feel like he was almost designed to be this way. I don't think it's a coincidence that he's one of the first people to die. Akana was another character that I wanted to like, but I just didn't. She reminded me of like Hina in a way, but she was more like more brash and a lot more fond of food. Kind of like Hina if she merged a little bit with Sakura, I guess. Maybe that's intentional, I don't know. But yeah, no, I wasn't a huge fan of Akana, and the last character that I wasn't a huge fan of was Gundam. I realized, like halfway through the game, that this guy is literally Odin Dark. He is literally Odin Dark with hamsters. Like, seriously, they're the same character. The way they speak, their entire gimmick, like, the way they do everything in an overly dramatic fashion, the way they talk about the darkness, they're literally the same character. I don't know if this is a common anime stereotype or anything like that, but it's the first time I see it. So, I will say, though, while I wasn't a huge fan of Gundam, it has nothing to do with the fact that Sonya got a crush on him, by the way. I just want to get this out of the way. I really did like his punishment. His punishment was heartbreaking. The way his hamsters carrying up into the heaven and stuff like that. That really, really broke my heart. And then I want to talk about my favorite trial of the second game. And without a doubt, it's going to have to be the second one. The one where Mahiru dies. Not really because of the trial itself. I actually found the whole investigation leading up to that a little annoying with the whole game inside of game thing that it did. I found it a little bit weird. But the ending of that trial is probably one of the most memorable moments I've had in the series overall. And judging by a lot of the comments that I read on various videos, it seems to have been a moment that really stuck with people. Turns out that he and Peko have been together since childhood, and they've been like really close to each other. I think it's implied that he loves her and that she loves him. And, you know, when he says, "Don't leave me," and he breaks down in tears, a tear rolled down my cheek, man. Like, I nearly cried. That was such an emotional moment, such a powerful moment, and it made me really like Fujihiko as a character. So that was insanely well done. Like, yeah, the trial itself wasn't super exciting to me, but the ending just made it so memorable. Wow, what a great moment. And so let's talk about the ending of the second game, and here I had really high expectations because, you know, the first game left so many questions unanswered, so I was hoping that this game would fill me more in, and it did, to some extent, but at the same time, I felt like every question it answered, it asked 2 more questions, so, you know, this is very much how this game is meant to be, I think. Like, it lives off the mystery, so if it explains everything, it's gonna get boring. I do realize that. But it turns out that, in the end, everything was just a virtual reality. The island wasn't real, we were just inside pods, and our avatars were walking about. However, the caveat of the game, of course, is that if your character dies in the game, you die in real life. It's very serious like that, so none of the students who were killed will come back. And I will admit, I was not a huge fan of this plot twist. Maybe some people love this kind of stuff where it's, you know, it's mind blown, you know, it was everything you've been told was a lie, but For me personally, I don't like twists like these. I hate endings that are like it was just a dream, or it never happened, or it was just an alternate reality, or stuff like that. I don't like that. I feel like for me that cheapens the experience a little bit. You know, not completely. I think your enjoyment of the game should be measured in how much fun you're having playing it, and not just how satisfying the ending is. But I do think that the ending will sometimes cheapen the experience a little bit if you get told that none of what you experienced actually happened in real life. It was just a simulation. You know, all the memories, all the students you met, all the friendships you forged. Of course, it's still real in a way. I mean, things that happen in video games can still really affect you in a big way, but I kind of wish that it wasn't a simulated reality, but that's just me, maybe. I did love seeing Junko again showing up as a virus. That was really funny, you know, a really cool ending. I loved seeing all the characters come back and entering the reality and fighting Junko back. It was a cool ending, but I wasn't a huge fan of the whole virtual aspect of it. It turns out that the reason why we got locked into this world was because Junko made us all go crazy, and the program was kind of like an anti-Junko fire, I guess. That was kind of like cleanses of despair or so. So that, you know, that was okay, I guess. And it explained a lot more about the world and everything that happened. But of course, towards the end, you all get shipped off on a boat, and again, the game leaves a lot of questions unanswered. You still don't get to know everything. And at this point, I kind of realized that I don't think the series will have a satisfactory ending, you know, and I think I should just be okay with that. Because the problem is, the better a game is and the more mysteries a game has, the bigger the payoff you expect at the end. When something is unbelievably amazing, and I did have a great time playing through the first two games, I really did, your expectations are so high that almost no matter what happens, you're going to be disappointed. I think that's just a curse in storytelling and video game in general. And that you should focus more on the fun that you're having while playing the game and not just on the ending. At least that's what I tried doing from this point onward, because I realized that, you know, I had one game left, and I kind of said to myself, I don't think the third game will be able to end this in a satisfactory manner, and I should just be okay with that. Even if it's just a Fade to Black and a mystery ending, I should still be okay with that. So at this point, I tried to temper my own expectations going into the third game, which we'll talk about next. So, it's time to talk about the third game, Danganronpa 3, The End of Hope's Peak. I had to go put on a sweater because I was a little cold. So once again in the third game, we are back to a school setting. I was very surprised. I was always under the impression that each game would have a completely different setting. You know, first games you're at a high school, then in the second game you're on a tropical island, and I thought maybe the third game would be somewhere completely different, but no, we're going back to a school setting. Although in this game you can go outside the school. There's like this giant dome around you that prevents you from moving further, but there is a nice mix of both inside and outside areas, so you get a little bit of both. But I will say it did kind of feel a little bit weird to go back to a school setting. I expected something different. So you once again get introduced to Monokuma, and he's now accompanied by 5 new sidekicks, the Monocubs, which honestly I found really annoying. I skipped most of their dialogue. I didn't really feel like they added much aside from just dragging out the plot. You know, whenever they talked, it just felt like filler to me. Like they never really had much important stuff to say. They were kind of just joking around, and I felt like at this point, Monokuma in particular had a little bit too much dialogue, especially with the Monocubs. I felt like it turned almost into sort of like a parody of itself, you know? In the first game, every time Monokuma talked, I found it very interesting because I was curious about who he was as a character and what his motivations were. But in the third game, I feel like he almost like devolved into sort of like a parody of himself, which tends to happen with overexposure, sadly, with many characters. So I kind of found him and the Monocubs just very annoying, and I was more interested in the students. Now, in this game, you start out as a kind of a cute waifu, like Kaeda, like the ultimate pianists, or pianists? Pianist? I don't know how you pronounce it. But it's weird because I remember looking at the main character and I was like, wow, what a lame gimmick for a main character, you know? I'd much rather be this detective guy. And of course, that's who you end up being after the cute pianist dies, which was a fun plot twist, I will add. Alright, so let's talk about my least and most favorite students of this game. Now, out of all the 3 games, the third one is probably where I'm most split. I like a lot of the students, and then I am very indifferent to a lot of the other ones. In the first 2 games, I liked most of the casts, but in the third game, there are some students that I don't really care for all that much. Again, it was very hit and miss. Some students were given a lot of screen time to evolve their personalities, while others I felt were just a little bit in the background. And many of them had very repetitive personalities, and I'll explain more about that when I get to them. them. But first, let's talk about my favorite students of the third game. Obviously, I loved Mew. I don't think I need to go into detail explaining why I loved her, but I found her personality pretty cute. I loved how she's super assertive, and then the moment you talk back to her, she backs off immediately. I don't know, I found that incredibly endearing. I spent a lot of my free time with her. I maxed out my friendship with her, and then towards the end she's like, oh, we should go on a date, and I'm like, yeah, we totally should. And then she bakes me a cake with her fingernails and hair in it, and I'm like, Mew, that's really freaking weird. That's kind of disturbing. I didn't expect that, but okay. I also like Kaido. He was very wholesome and a fun personality. I can see some people finding him a little annoying, and he was a little annoying at times. He wasn't a very useful student, but I really liked the energy that he brought, and the way he takes you out to work out at evening times before bedtime. That was very cool. There's a bit of a bromance there. He eventually goes and gets Maki and gets her to participate in the training as well, which forms a nice little triangle friendship between all of you, which was very nice, definitely very nice. I really enjoyed that. Of course, I was very curious to see where the side plot with his illness, where that would take him and stuff like that. And it was very tragic in the end when he died. But of course, he kind of one-upped Monokuma because he died before the execution, so Monokuma didn't get to kill him, which was kind of a cool way to go out. He's the only student that actually have gone out that way. And speaking of the workout sessions, Maki was another student that I really liked. I didn't like her at first. I found her very annoying, because she was just kind of standing around being all cold and not wanting to talk to anyone. But then she gradually started opening up, and it was just really heartwarming to see her suddenly start to care for you and Kaido. And I don't know, at first I didn't like her design. I thought she looked weird, but then as I grew more endeared to her character, I kind of found that she became hotter. It's weird. I don't know why. It's strange. Her character model doesn't change, but the way I viewed her changed, and I actually thought she became really pretty towards the end. I don't know, it's kind of strange, but yeah, and it was really sad, obviously, to see her go down in tears once Kaido died, and she revealed that she actually had feelings for him, which was also very, very sad. And it was nice to see that she was one of the students who survived to the end. I really liked that. But there is one student that completely stole the show for me. He made the third game what it was. He is leagues above anyone else in terms of how fascinating he was. Kokichi. Man, what an incredible character. At first, I thought he was just kind of annoying, but as the game progressed, he became so fascinating. He always made things happen, he always spiced up the cases, you never knew what he was going to do next, you never knew where you had him because he kept lying, and you never knew if he spoke the truth or if he lied or what he did. He was just such a perplexing character. And whenever he was involved, I was hooked, and I was so interested in seeing what he was going to do next. And he always spiced up the class trials, kind of like Nagito from the second game. He always made things happen, and he clearly understood a lot of what was going on. He tried to usurp the whole goddamn game and get one-up the mastermind, which is incredible. Like, that is absolutely incredible. So I loved Kokichi. He definitely made the game what it was. It would not be the same without him. Now, moving on to the students that I didn't like so much, and it's not that I hated them or anything, I just found them a little boring. Gonta, he was a very wholesome character. I liked him a lot to begin with, but he was one of those characters that just got very repetitive for me. Like, he just said and did the same things. He was very simple, you know. He's like, Gonta be gentleman, Gonta protect everyone, Gonta not understand. And that was all he did, you know. He never changed much. Same thing with Tenko. You know, she was just very similar all the time, you know. Oh, hi, sneak attack, oh, degenerate male, blah, blah, blah. Kind of fun thing about Tenko, I've actually practiced Aikido for many years. I'm a beginner, obviously, but she is like the opposite of everything Aikido, really. Like, she's aggressive, she likes to sneak attack people, she likes to attack first. She calls it Neo Aikido, which is completely wrong, because the whole purpose of Aikido is that it's very faithful to its roots and it doesn't really evolve like other martial arts. They keep it very traditional. So the fact that she develops a new Aikido, like, I think she's very intentionally not a good Aikido student, which is weird, but that's just how she is, I suppose. And then finally, of course, Tsumugi. I found her incredibly bland. I don't think I spent a single amount of free time with her. She didn't do anything. Of course, in the end, it turns out she's the mastermind, which is okay, I suppose. I mean, maybe she's bland and in the background for a reason. She doesn't want to stick out, which I suppose is okay. But as far as her personality goes, I was just not interested in her at all. I just found her incredibly boring. And when she was revealed to be the mastermind at the end, I was just like, oh, okay. I didn't see that one coming, because I just don't care about Tsumugi, so that was kind of fun. Alright, so my favorite trial of the third game is actually the very first one, because of how much it surprised me. You know, I remember asking the person I was playing the first game with, you know, can we ever be the murderer? And I thought that was a kind of a funny question, because of course we can't, you know, like, you can never instigate a murder in Danganronpa, you can only react to what happens around you. But in the first trial of the third game, that is exactly what happens. You are actually the killer. But the player doesn't know that. You've been controlling this character, but you haven't seen everything she's done. The clues are certainly there, you can probably see it if you're very perceptive, but there's no way of, like, I don't think many people see this immediately. I certainly didn't see it. And, you know, after 2 games and seeing so many different murder cases, I thought that the game wouldn't be able to surprise me anymore, but boy did it surprise me. And once I realized that I was actually the killer, I was like, well, what happens now? I'm gonna die. And then of course the cute piano girl dies, and you just swap main characters over to Suichi the detective. Which of course, he's a much cooler main character, like, who wants to play as the ultimate pianist? Like, come on, that's a pretty lame gimmick, but yeah, no, I really liked the first trial, just because of how it completely, like, pulled the wool over my eyes, and I did not see that coming in a million years. And it's nice to see that after 3 games, they can still really surprise you with all these weird mysteries, you know? The trial itself was kind of simple, obviously. You do get to see towards the end that it wasn't actually Kaede who murdered that guy, it was actually the mastermind, which is, you know, once you reach the end of the game, you have to go back and reinvestigate the first trial, and you find out that there's actually been cheating involved. But despite that, I still think it's a really cool trial and a really cool plot twist. So let's talk about the ending of the third game, and this is where all the questions are going to be answered, this is where everything's going to fall into place. And at this point, I'm kind of nervous because I realize that regardless of what the ending's going to be, I'm probably not going to like it, because it's just so hard to wrap up a series like this. It's been such a grand adventure, and there's been so many questions and so many mysteries, and how on earth is the game going to wrap it all up in a meaningful way? So at this point, I try not to expect too much. I'm just gonna be okay with whatever comes my way. I'm even expecting something silly like a Fade to Black, or maybe like, oh, it was all a dream, or something like that. But what did it end up being? You know, why are we trapped inside this killing game and forced to do this over and over again? Turns out that Danganronpa is just one giant reality show. And the big reveal is that this is not the 3rd Danganronpa game, this is actually the 53rd season of Danganronpa. It's been going on for a very long time, it's the most popular reality show in the world. Everyone is watching it from their phones and from their computers and tablets. Everyone's paying attention to it and cheering on and absolutely loving it, and they love the blood sport. And this was kind of foreshadowed in the first game, because we do know that Junko is like broadcasting the show to the outside world, but we get told that she's doing it to make them feel despair, whereas in reality she's doing it because it's a popular show and everyone loves it. And of course, an even bigger reveal is that all the students who are participating in the Danganronpa games, they're there of their own free will. They signed up for this reality show knowing what it was because they wanted to be a part of it. And when they do, they get their memories wiped, and then they get a fake personality inserted into them. So all the ultimate talent stuff, it's all just fake, you know, it's all fabricated. None of them are actually ultimate students, their backstories are made up on the spot, basically. You know, Kaito, who's all this happy-go-lucky guy, and he loves everyone and wants to protect everyone, he signs up for Danganronpa wanting to kill people, you know, he's a bit of a jerk. And the whole show ends with, we essentially have to make people stop caring about Danganronpa, so the way we shut down the game is to not participate in the game and just refuse to vote, refuse to participate, you know, just sign off from Danganronpa. We don't want to be part of it anymore, we don't want Danganronpa to continue because it's immoral. But of course the grand irony is that we do want Danganronpa to continue, and I feel like this ending, even though I wasn't a huge fan of it, I was really invested in the world of Danganronpa, I was really invested in the lore, you know, the tragedy, everything that went on. And upon hearing that it's all fiction, that it's all just made up, it did feel a little cheap to me, because, you know, I was curious to see where the world goes. But I think this is very much intentional. It wants you to feel that way. It wants you to feel like this is a bit of a waste. And I also think that this ending is a bit of a play on our own values. Because essentially what the game is saying is, this is horrible. A bunch of high school students gets trapped, locked into an area, and forced to kill each other. And you love it. And it is true. It's really, really fun solving these murder mysteries. The anticipation of the next murder, the fact that someone's gonna kill each other and then you have to figure out who it is. It's fun. It's entertaining, and we love it. It's horrible, but we love it. And if Danganronpa was a real show that aired on television or was streamed onto Twitch or whatnot, I mean, I'd watch it. As long as I know that all the students are there of their own free will, that they're not forced to do this, even though it may seem that way because their memories are wiped. As long as I know that everyone who's part of the show are there because they want to be there, man, I'd watch it. Can you imagine how popular a show like that would be in today's modern age? If this was live streamed, a bunch of teenagers locked into an academy forced to kill each other, as long as we get past the moral hurdles of showing like murder on television, which would obviously be like a big no-no. I'm not saying it would be a good thing if a show like this did exist. What I am saying is that if a show like Danganronpa actually existed in the real world, it would probably be one of the most popular things on television. And of course, you know, in the end, you manage to convince the world that this show is horrible and immoral, and everyone starts turning off the show, and that's how you win, basically. And then Kibo destroys the academy, and then the ending is kind of left a little bit vague, because as Maki, Himiko, and Suichi like crawl out of the rubble and they go to the outside world, they're kind of like, oh, but is it really fiction? What is the outside world really like? Did they lie to us? Maybe it's actually, maybe all of this was real? I don't know, maybe we'll find out. And then, you know, they leave. And then I think that's the end of it. I don't know if a fourth game is being developed. I know there's some spin-off games that I haven't tried, but... So, yeah, the ending wasn't... Again, I'm very torn on it. It makes sense. Like, it's a sensible ending, and it was a big reveal. I didn't expect it. At the same time, I don't think that there would have been any ending that would have been satisfying in the end. Like, honestly, a Fade to Black with, like, we don't know why any of this happened probably would have been okay too. But yeah, no, I think this is just a giant... It's a bit of a referendum on our values and what we find entertaining, you know? I think what the game is trying to make fun of, in a sense, is the fact that we think murder is wrong, and yet we play video games where we gun people down, and we find that entertaining. So maybe a part of us, it's kind of trying to highlight that little dark side inside all humans that kind of find murder fun when we shouldn't. You know, as long as we know that it's fictional, as long as we know that it's not serious, we still enjoy things that are kind of dark. And I think that's kind of what Danganronpa is trying to tell us, that there's a darkness inside all of us and that we do enjoy fucked up things, even though we don't want to admit it. And yeah, like if Danganronpa was a real show, fuck, I'd watch that crap out of that, you know? It feels so wrong, but I would, you know? It would be really entertaining. So yeah, that concludes my thoughts on the 3 Danganronpa games. I had a blast playing them. It was a lot of fun. If you watch this video and you want to play it and you haven't played it, you definitely should go check it out. Of course, I've spoiled the game for you, so that, you know, I hope that didn't ruin your experience, but it's definitely a series worth trying out. But, you know, I spent a lot of time with these games, and I really enjoyed them, and I figured, you know what, why not make a video talking about it? It might be some people on my channel who might find this very entertaining. Even if it's just a few of you guys out there who have played Danganronpa who wanted to hear my opinions on it. Let me know what you think. Let me know which of the Danganronpa games are your favorite, which of your students are your favorites. And yeah, just leave some funny memories from Danganronpa in the comment section below. I love to hear what you have to say about this game. And if you do end up trying it yourself, let me know how it goes. My name is Manx. So long. Bear well.